Hi everyone, welcome. We're down here in my wormery preparing to check in on a couple of my worm bins. They're actually my oldest active systems. The systems that had been older were both harvested, if you want to consider it that way. The worms relocated. And it was actually two systems, all the harvested castings collected into a single bin, try to round up, any sort of stragglers that were left behind in the material. And I assume that when it comes time to give these little guys a new home, we'll do something similar. So it's not a big rush to try to get every last worm out. There's usually a pretty good effective way to bait them and collect them up after the fact. So we probably do want to start considering the relocation of these worms, and up until even the last check-in, we were doing stuff that I would normally not even want to do in systems that are being thought of that way. I would be adding leaves, because to me leaves are always something that means you're getting leaf stems, the little tiny nuisance object that takes forever to break down. So I usually treat that as a material not to use in more senior systems. So we won't be adding leaves anymore from this point forward, but we will be feeding them. So we're going to do that now. Let's get them up on the bench and get started. Much of what they're getting today is stuff out of my garden, just been sitting around for a little too long now. Other stuff is store-bought. There's some cabbage in here and leaves of this and that. A lot of tomatoes though. If you go down low, there's even more down there. Nice juicy meal, as well as coffee and the coffee filters. We've been using the same coffee filters for at least 2 feedings now, because when I watched the video from last time, they were not fresh new ones, they were ones that were being reused. And we don't have to reuse them anymore because we've got replacements. To me, that piece of paper there is now not feeding zone indicator anymore. It's just surplus bedding. That'll probably just get dumped down into the feeding area. These pieces of paper I like to have on the top, and occasionally we'll put those down there. But I also knew that there'd be a lot of leftover leafy matter too, because we laid down a bunch of this nice fresh leafy stuff last time when we finished. It was very similar to the time before, because the time before too, we came into the bin, found a bunch of leaves that had been spread out from the time before, blended all that stuff in, and I was really looking forward to blending all this stuff right in. And it'll pretty much saturate the the contents of both bins with a whole bunch of nice, man, look at all that castings. You know what? That would just prolong things, I think. Now I'm kind of thinking it through. As much as I've been wanting to blend this stuff in, we're going to save it. We're going to sort of transition these systems from my typical feeding routine of putting the foods right down the middle. And I think we're going to apply the food over on the edge of the bin that's, I guess, over closer to you guys, on that edge, where I'm clearing things off now. And then all this leafy matter can become the foundational bedding for our feeding. It's like pretty much the most ideal foundational bedding I think you can have is stuff that's already been in the bin for 13 days now. 13 days that that have passed since we gave them their last feeding. I've just been sort of on a kick now. Every time my hand bumps into a corn cob piece, I want to just fragment it, which I never used to do in the past. But it's so cool to feel how fragile this stuff has become, and how easy it is to crack it just with a couple fingers, while previously this stuff had been so tough that it required like 2 hands to break it or something like that, right? So it does feel to me like as I break each of these up, I'm just exposing more of the material to more worm traffic. But it's a little bit time consuming, especially now if you're hunting down, a ton of little tiny pieces that you've broken up in previous efforts. But maybe I should limit myself to only messing around with ones that are kind of large. Picking up every piece to check it out and break it apart will just continuously become more and more tedious. So, one thing we didn't do during the last check-in, I remember when I fed this last time, when I watched the video, I was looking at that stem thinking, Man, that stem is never going to go. But if we put it in with the material that we're going to use as sort of the initiation of the migration of the worms out of the material by feeding on the edge of the bin, then, sorry, I can't help myself breaking the corner part. Then it doesn't matter if we've got sort of a slower material that we can just include down here with the bedding. It'll have more time. We don't leave it mixed in with this, but where did it go? Here it is. Okay. Some tomato stem, I believe that is. So I guess if we bump into anything else like that, older types of things that we think are going to take a long time, we can sort of separate it from the stuff that seems to be right on the verge of becoming just beautiful finished castings. Got some leftover this and that. I think I might have gotten peach last time. No, that's citrus. I remember pieces of lime, pieces of lemon going in too, and I knew that those were going to take a little bit longer. And, you know, some people will tell you, oh, citrus, not good in the worm bin, but I think, I don't know, if you ask these worms, I'm sure they would have a different point of view on the matter. It's a piece of lime, I believe. Or lemon? Something like that. It smells so fresh. Look at all the wormies. Not appreciating being out here in the light. I know, I'm mean. But I just like checking them out. You know, after all that time, it was just a moment ago that this one little tiny guy dropped off. Oh, came through my fingers, and now they're down there being curious, but are also at peril, possibly falling off my hand. Okay, look at that. That piece of citrus, whatever it was, it just sort of melted in my hand. Fell apart into about 3 or 4 pieces under the slightest little bit of pressure. But yeah, these little wormies, they're definitely enjoying this stuff. So let's get the show on the road. Last time we did not, for whatever reason, inspect the outer edges of the bins. All we did was we opened up a crevice down the middle of the system. We fed this big chunk of corn cob. I'll just put it over here. And then we just kind of assumed that everything in the outskirts of the bin was in good shape and that we could ignore it and not disturb it and let's leave it be. And now, as you can see, the stuff looks terrific. So many castings piling up over there. A good bit of stuff blended in too. And I'll be curious to see what things look like on this edge too. But I guess the special thing about this edge that we just inspected, I shouldn't have backfilled it, because what we should be doing is planting their food over there. And the stuff that hole should have been filled with is all this stuff over here. All this beautiful seasoned bedding. So let's return bin number 1 to the excavated state that it was in a moment ago, the way we should have left it. Then we can start piling in the bedding we've got. It's, I don't know, to me it doesn't seem like it's going to be all that much, so we don't need a huge space. So let's see how much we got. Actually, no, we got ourselves a pretty good quantity here. Stuff looks good. Worms are going to appreciate that. Once we start dropping in those frozen veggies, especially all those tomatoes with the juices coming out of them, oh boy. It's going to be a popular spot, that's for sure. Alright. At this point, I don't know why, but I just feel like I can't resist trying to pick off all of this stuff, or as much of it as I can. Create a really nice, spacious area over there, so that if they go over, they'll possibly be inclined to just stay there. Because at this point, we'll just keep feeding on that edge, and then we'll continue to slightly ignore the opposite edge by not feeding there, but also maybe by giving it more exposure to the air and to the potential of drying. That's another thing to do, but I don't know, that might be a little bit premature at this point. I think we've still got so much stuff in this that we need the wormies to work down further, so I think we're in pretty good shape. So I don't know, I've been kind of altering my approach to adding the coffee these days. Not always putting it in at the end, sometimes putting it in earlier, but you know what? These reminded me that we've got some extra paper here that needs to be done away with. Let's get this down here. It's part of the foundation for today's feeding. It's kind of in the spot that you don't want to be in because the worms are going to be all over it. And it's going to get destroyed, that's for sure. With all these goodies that we're going to be sprinkling on top of it. And we got ourselves some nice new feeding zone indicators that are finally kind of serving a little bit more of a purpose by actually showing us where the food is, not down the middle, down where we usually put it, but rather off on the edge. A lot of times I'll be going to my worm chow right now to sprinkle in and into the coffee, but the stuff I'm sprinkling in right now is pulverized dried corn on the cob. A lot of the kernels were in there too still, mostly cob though. I got a whole other jar of this stuff. This is starting to take up so much space. I'm thinking between today and perhaps the next feeding, we're gonna have to get rid of that stuff. And one of the bins is gonna get a big fat tomato. And I think to be fair, we got to give the other bin a good many smaller tomatoes. And here we've got some leaves of this and that, and stems of other things, and definitely more tomato. That sort of stuff's not going to go very long. It's the sort of stuff that the worms will definitely gobble up. 1, 2, 3. Well, they're going to love all this stuff with all the juiciness in it. They're going to leave behind the skins. We'll come back in here and it'll be just a bunch of husks of tomatoes. Tomato skins that the worms couldn't eat, but they will have sucked out all the juicy bits already. All the sweet, juicy bits. I don't know. Were we fair? Do we need to put a couple over here? I don't know. That big tomato is sort of blending in and it's kind of deceptive. And stems, whatever. Alright, I'm just so curious to see how things on this edge look. So let's do a quick inspection of that and we'll be finished. Now we've got our nice new replacement feeding zone indicators showing us where we just fed off on the edge. Like so. And over here I'm sort of expecting to see just a whole bunch more pretty far along material. There's all kinds of little this and that in it. So keeping it damp so that the worms keep working it is going to be key. But it's going to get ignored more and more as the feedings keep getting piled in on the other side. But it should all go. I'm pretty confident of it. Hopefully. We'll just have to see. So far so good. Really nice, you know. And I think it is maybe the concerns over the capacity of the systems. I don't know, somehow it just does feel to me like I'm very close to the edge, especially when I'm, you know, trying to do a big excavation right there on the side, so close to the edge. It feels like I need a little protective barrier over here just to make sure I don't make a silly mistake and dump a couple handfuls of this stuff onto myself. Yeah, very nice, very nice. Somehow this stuff seemed a little bit, I don't know, somehow not as far along maybe. It's hard to say. Alright, very nice. Really like how these systems are looking. I guess from this point on, my tracking system, I'll be considering these as in the migration phase. And I'll be considering these as, I don't know, I label them in my tracking system as horizontal feedings or something like that, and then that's a particular expression that my spreadsheet actually looks for and counts, so that I can even have like a separate little counter just showing me exactly how many of the feedings I've done were actually, you know, geared for trying to get the worms to migrate. And at this point, this feeding will be classified as such, I think. And as far as the phases that the worm bins are in, from now on, I don't know if I would really even consider these as active composting, although what they're doing is everywhere still, obviously, composting, but it's more got a new focus anymore in my mind, you know, and it's towards getting closer and closer to harvest, so we can get them off onto a new environment, and then we can gather up their beautiful castings. Alright everyone, that's it for the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. If you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. Alright everyone, thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye now.